Oh, as you know, I'm a fan of Cowboy Poetry, and I've got one to read to you this morning. I don't have it memorized. However, I don't know who wrote it either, and that's kind of sad. I've had people tell me, oh yeah, I know who wrote it, and they all send me different names. So, reminds me of when I worked at my first pastorate, I had to work to pastor. I worked for Tidewater Oil Company, and I had become kind of a purchasing agent for them down there. And if you don't know southeastern Louisiana, you've just missed a lot of the world, folks. It is not in the United States. And when I was there, we literally had a dictator. He was not even part of the government officially. But if you were in a PTA, you didn't even make a report from a committee in the Parent-Teacher Association without checking it with this guy first. Make sure it was what he wanted to say, is that kind of fellow. But in that, the Oklahoma Tire and Supply, Oklahoma Oil Supply, established one of their things down there, and the owner or the manager told me that when they came down there, they found a building they thought they could use, and they tacked on the door a sign that said, on a certain day we're going to be here. Whoever owns this, if you could show up with a title, we'll pay you rent if you'll let us rent it. He said 5 different people showed up with titles. That was the kind of way it was down there. I don't know why I'm telling you that. But it was a rather interesting thing to live down there too. Oh man, I got in trouble because I didn't register to vote for a couple of years while I was there, and then I got a call from one of the henchmen of the dictator because I started teaching school. You're working for the administration now, and you aren't registered to vote. You got to register. Look, I didn't come here to get involved in politics. I just want to help people live and teach about Jesus. Well, you're going to have to register. And I said, well, they're only open 5 days a week, and I'm teaching 5 days a week. They'll be open this Saturday. So we caught the ferry across the Point of Lahash, and sure enough, there was one person in the county seat there with his feet up on the desk. I think he was a deputy sheriff or something. Now, I debated constitutional issues when I was in high school on a debate team, so I knew things. And they gave tests. You had to pass a constitutional test to be able to vote. It was those days. Well, I knew the wrong answers. I failed the test, but I passed. And you can guess why. I was the right color. Well, what do you want? Are you a Democrat or a Republican? I said, nope, I'm neither of those. Can I register as independent? You sure you want to do that? Yeah, all right. That was Saturday. Monday morning, this guy calls me screaming at me, you can't help if you're an independent, you got to be this or that or whatever. I forget what I was. So then I started getting death threats, And then I kind of felt like I was in the New Testament. Why did I tell you that? I don't know.
You were saying that we were strange. You were saying that we were strange.
Well, yeah, I guess that's where it started. One look at you and I thought, I need to tell him some more stories. But anyway, this is entitled Jake the Rancher. Jake the rancher went one day to fix a distant fence. The wind was cold and gusty, and the clouds rolled gray and dense. As he pounded the last staples in and gathered tools to go, the temperature had fallen and the snow began to blow. When he finally reached his pickup, he felt a heavy heart. From the sound of that ignition, he knew it wouldn't start. So Jake did what most of us would do if we had been there. He humbly bowed his balding head and sent aloft a prayer. As he turned the key for the last time, he knew he had lost his luck. They found him 3 days later, frozen stiff in that old truck. Now, Jake had been around in life and done his share of roaming, but when he saw heaven, he was shocked. It looked just like Wyoming. Oh, there were some differences, of course, but just some minor things. One place had simply disappeared, the town they call Rock Springs. I've been there. It should disappear. The BLM had been shut down, and there was no grazing fees, and the wind in Rawlins and Cheyenne was now a gentle breeze. The Park and Forest Service folks, they didn't fare so well. They had all been sent to fight some fire in a wilderness called hell. Though heaven was a real nice place, Jake had a wandering mind, so he saddled up and rode away not knowing what he'd find. Then one day up in Cody, on a cold fall afternoon, he saw St. Peter coming, and he knew he'd be there soon. Of all the saints in heaven, his favorite was St. Peter. Now, this line, it ain't needed, but it helps with rhyme and meter. You do what you have to do, you know. So they sat and talked a minute or two, or maybe it was 3. Nobody was keeping score, and heaven time is free. I've always heard, Jake said to Pete, that God will answer prayers. But one time I asked for help, well, he just plain wasn't there. Does God answer prayers of some and ignores the prayers of others? That don't seem exactly square. I know all men are brothers. Or does he randomly reply without good rhyme or reason? Maybe it's the time of day, the weather, or the season. Now, I ain't trying to act smart. It's just the way I feel. And I was wondering, could you tell Pete, what is heaven's deal? Peter listened very patiently, and when Jake was done, there were smiles of recognition, and he said, so you're the one. That day, your truck, it wouldn't start, and you sent your prayer a-flying. You gave us all a real bad time with hundreds of us trying. 1,000 angels rushed to check the status of your file. But you know, Jake, we hadn't heard from you in quite a while. And though all prayers are answered and God ain't got no quota, he didn't recognize your voice and started a truck in North Dakota. I love cowboy poetry. I've been to only one of their gatherings, and I discovered that if you get dirty, they kick you out. They stay clean in those things. It's amazing. Well, we started last night talking about the nature of Jesus as revealed in his greatest in the kingdom teachings. And Jesus makes some very powerful references to it. And you know he did this over and over because they fought constantly. One of the places which I will kind of get to this morning that proves it is that, you know, they didn't sit at tables like we do to eat. Their tables were low, and they would recline on pads or pillows or blankets or whatever, and their feet would stick out from the table like the spokes of a wheel. Now, these tables tended to be what they called a Roman triclinium, which was a squared-off horseshoe-shaped table. Now, you begin to understand some things when you realize that was the way it was, and I'm going to get to that, but I just want you to have that image in your mind when we do get to it. One of the things that I used as a definition of servanthood is being others-centered. But let me make it even simpler. Servanthood is making life better for someone else. It's real simple. It's not complicated at all. Another of the definitions is a servant is a freedom agent. He frees other people to live, you see. And when Jesus makes the statement that he came to make you free, he was being a freedom agent. He wasn't coming to bind us up, which that's a definition of religion, is to bind people up. And he didn't come to do that. He said, that's what the thief does. He comes to kill, to steal, and destroy. But I'm come that you might have life and have great gobs of it. That's my translation. More abundantly, see. And when I feel people kind of trying to diminish my life, I realize you're not a servant. You're not a freedom agent. You're in charge of binding people up. Now, I'll be honest with you. Understanding what it means to be a freedom agent, to be a servant, affects my politics. It affects the way I view political positions. Are you a freedom agent? Or are you trying to bind me up and make me feel like I've failed or something's wrong with me if I, so. Well, when the coming of Jesus was prophesied, one of the best ways that I love is from Isaiah chapter 40, beginning with verse 3, where it says, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord. Okay, I've heard sermons on that, and every one of them scared me. Because obviously I wasn't very good at it, What have you been doing to prepare the way of the Lord? You sinner! Kill me now. But we lose track of what that road was to be like. Made straight in the desert a highway. Now, I live in the desert, but we have straighter roads than you have up here. When Dave Buer and Josh's son were trying to get here last night, it was well, they didn't get here until it was too late. But I know I've been I spent 3 weeks in New England, rented a car in Baltimore, and I had 5 stops I needed to make. I got lost on every one of them. Because in New England, they don't believe in straight roads. They don't believe in putting up street signs. And sometimes they believe in putting up street signs that are different from what that street's really named. And I got lost 5 times. But when it comes to the road to God, He wants it straight. You can't get lost on a straight road. Now, this is what God does because He loves children. Those are His favorite. I don't know if you realize that. Some people say, God doesn't have any favorites. Yes, He does. And it's children. He loves children. In fact, we got to be like one to enter the kingdom. He said that's what the kingdom's made of. Well, a child is terrified if he's suddenly in a road that's not straight. He doesn't know what's around that corner or will get lost. So God says, I want a straight road. And I want the valleys to be exalted and the hills to be made low, which means I want a level road. No one will be able to say, I don't think I can climb that hill, or, oh, I'll stumble going down this one. No. I want a level road. I want a straight road to me, and I want a smooth road. Every pothole will be filled, and every speed bump will be brought low, man. A smooth road to me. And then, sure enough, John the Baptist comes preaching something new. Man, over 600 rules and regulations, and now he says, hey, guess what? Repent and be baptized for remission of sins. What? Everybody, except, of course, the religious leaders, come out to be baptized. And John says, hey, you like this? You ain't seen nothing yet. I'm just announcing one. Man, he's so good. I'm not even worthy to mess with his shoestrings. And sure enough, Jesus comes along, and he's preaching a message that the Charetz, you got to learn how to, the Charetz, or the common or poor people of the land. Israel didn't really have a middle class. You were poor or you were rich. And all of the Pharisees, by the way, were rich because they believed if you were poor, it was because you were cursed. And therefore, you couldn't be cursed and be a member of the Pharisees. So if you were a Pharisee, you were rich. Well, they weren't going to come out, but everybody else did. And sure enough, Jesus comes along, and the Am Charetz, the poor people of the land, heard him gladly. Why? suddenly things were so simple, where they had been so complicated. I don't know if any of you do your own taxes. My taxes do me. I have to have computer help, even though it's simple. What I do is simple. But suddenly it's extremely complicated, you know. And in fact, my memory is such, I have trouble remembering the speed limit. I consider it a recommendation anyway. But now with all of these 600 plus laws, rules, and regulations, suddenly it becomes very simple. And the crowds just followed Jesus massively. Well, in Matthew chapter 22, a drama begins that is very productive. And I'm going to read it the way I read it. Then I'll read it right. When the Republicans heard that he had silenced the Democrats, go study it for yourself. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, things don't change, folks. They gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, and lawyers don't change either. I don't know. The only way I got a couple of lawyer friends. I'm not their clients, for which I'm grateful. But I make sure they hear the latest lawyer jokes, for which they're grateful. And I always ask them, are you a wonderful lawyer? You see, when it says wonderful counselor in Isaiah, that just says wonderful lawyer. Now, I don't know about here, but in California, we don't use the word wonderful and lawyer in the same sentence. But a lawyer, I mean, what I know of lawyers is what I see on television. And every lawyer I see isn't trying to get the truth out. They're trying to trap. Gotcha. And it's what happened back then, too. Things haven't changed. So a lawyer asked him a question. Teacher. And I think there was some syrup in that. Teacher. What is the Great Commandment? Now, it's a stupid question because every practicing Jewish home would begin the day with what's called the Great Shema. And it would be a simple and short declaration of who God is and what they were to do. It was a creed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That's it. Not a bad creed. Everybody knew this. And Jesus immediately answered. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind. In Matthew, it doesn't say strength, but it does other places, so I add that to it. He says that's the first and greatest commandment. And the second one is just like it. He elevates it to the same level. Love your neighbor as yourself. Oh boy. You know, this would be a great world if it weren't for people. And of course, the question becomes, who is my neighbor? And the great story that we call the story of the Good Samaritan. And Jesus changes the definition of neighbor. It becomes whoever you have the opportunity to serve beneficially. Well, rather than spend a lot of time on the definition of love, and, well, I might. I'm going to define love in just a minute because it has to be defined biblically. Otherwise, we're in a lot of trouble. We have let Hollywood define love for us, and actually they took the wrong word. Theirs was spelled L-U-S-T, and they defined that as love, and that is not the biblical definition. Jesus does define love specifically, and you're going to hear it today, and I hope that it'll do for you what it's done for me. But the neighbor thing is really anyone that you can beneficially serve, which was proved in the Good Samaritan thing. The thing, too, is, racism hasn't changed. The Jews hated the Samaritans. They thought of them as half-breeds, In fact, here's the way they would deal with it. The priests would declare them not human beings. They aren't really human, so you can treat them any way you want. It's okay. And so when Jesus tells the story in response to who is my neighbor, guess what? A Samaritan comes along and he does the servant thing. And Jesus then says, okay, now, who is my neighbor? They understood that very well. And I've had people ask me, well, how can I love my neighbor when I don't love myself? I smoke them out real fast, you know. I'll say, oh, but I don't know why, because you're just so lovely. They'll say, really? You think so? Anything else you've noticed about me? Look, if you got up this morning, you love yourself. If you bothered to eat, you love yourself. If you decided not to eat, it was because you loved yourself. I have to sometimes not eat because I love myself. Not that the food is not good. It is good, but I have a scale that talks to me. It says nasty things. Where'd you get these guys? Now, in the law, it does say, Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor as yourself. It's right there in the law. And we do love ourselves, guys. So how can we then love our neighbor as ourselves? Well, I take you now to, by the way, there's one more verse in that passage in Matthew 22 that often is not noticed. Jesus says, on these 2 commandments hang all. How much is all? The law and the prophets. Now, you by now know that this book does not anywhere in it call itself the Bible. That's something we call it. Bible simply means library, and to differentiate it from other libraries, we call it the Holy Library. But it never says it's the Bible in here. That word's not used. Their word for the Bible was the law and the prophets. In other words, you get this right, and you have conquered the Bible. Love God, love your neighbor. Whoa. All right. But now what is love? Man. In 2012, on this search engine called Google, I can't believe I let that pass my lip. The most common question asked was, what is love? Isn't that something? We're still trying to figure that out. What is love? You know, when you're young and you first are kind of interfacing with the opposite sex, you begin to ask that question, am I in love? What, how come I feel like this, though? And, you know, I feel sick. I'm in love. Yeah, you're in love. If you're sick. You know. So what is the definition of love? In John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35, and you guys know this by heart, Jesus said, a new commandment I give you. Now, these guys to whom he was talking were guys who did not love each other. They fought with each other all the time. This wasn't a band of wonderfully loving each other brothers, which is so encouraging to me because it lets me know that God can work with jerks, man. He picked these guys right off the street. And I look at you, and every one of you is apostolic material. You jerks, you know. It's an encouraging thing to me. He chose them, I'm convinced, just to prove who he could work with. He didn't look for the elite, the graduates, the super dudes and so forth. No, he didn't look for Super Bowl winners. He looked for guys that on the streets, man, with no hope much. Even Peter as a fisherman. When I get to heaven, I'm going to ask him if he's really as bad a fisherman as the Bible puts him out to be. Because every time we see him, he's fished all night and caught nothing. He was a pro. And God picks guys like that. So Jesus says, a new commandment I give you. Now here I'm going to make a strong and crazy suggestion. This wasn't a new commandment. This was the new commandment. to fulfill and, in a sense, replace all other commandments. I better prove that, hadn't I? I shall. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another. And I'm sure when the guys heard that, they thought, oh man, does he know who he's talking to? You expect us to love each other? Huh? Why didn't he find someone we can love? That all they ever did was fight each other. I would have fired them so quick. You know, Dave Buer with his son Josh is here. Dave used to work for me full time, and he quit and came up north. I don't know why. How long did you work for me? 15, 20, 30 years? 7 years. Oh, okay. Well, you're taking a sabbatical. All right. But when he said to them to love one another, then he defines it as I have loved you, that you love one another. When I first saw that, I thought, oh man, I'm going to have to get crucified. And that didn't excite me. But he's speaking past tense. As I have loved you. Oh, how had he loved them? Well, thank you for asking. We go back to the beginning of that chapter, and it says it was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world. See, it was an ongoing and past process. He now, and if it doesn't say now in your Bible, check out the words. It's a now word. He now showed them just how much he loved them, or loved them to the end, or the full extent of his love. Wow, what is about to happen? Okay, he gets up from that table. And he does something we're unacquainted with, and that's why I have to explain it, you see. We have, in the United States, we have the world's simplest greeting rituals. If I were to come and knock on your door today, I would hope you would come to the door, Gayle, good to see you, and you'd hug me and you'd invite me in. Have a seat, let me get you a cup of Christian coffee. And that's greeting rituals. We have the simplest greeting rituals in the world. But if this were 2,000 years ago, it'd be different. You would embrace me and kiss me on both cheeks, which they still do in some places in this world. You would seat me, and if I were especially welcomed, you would anoint my head with oil. Now, we do that. The Bible, tells us to anoint them with oil and pray for the sick. But we have this little tiny vial of oil, and tuk, tuk. Gotcha. Well, that's okay, but that's not the way they did it back then. They'd have this bottle of olive oil, and they would empty it on your head and slick it down. Yuck. But this was before the days of shampoos and hair dryers. They wouldn't have to slick it down on your head at all. They'd pour it on, it'd hit your shoes almost immediately. I can talk about this. Now, this was before the days of shampoos and hair dryers, but that was a very soothing, honoring, cleansing, and healing thing to do. And there's another advantage to it, too. If I were to leave your house today, especially welcome, who would know? But back then, everybody would know. Man, somebody loves that dude. Look at that greasy head, see? But there was another part of the greeting ritual back then that we know the words, but we're totally unfamiliar with it. Everybody then walked with sandals. The roads were but dust. It didn't take too long before walking was uncomfortable. Now, hospitality is the art of making people comfortable. It's real simple. And so, they'd wash your feet. One problem. They believed back then, as Muslims and Arabs do to this day, that the bottom of the foot is the dirtiest part of the body. We don't believe that today. So, the host isn't going to wash your feet. If he has any servants, the lowest ranked servant would be the one called on to do that, because that was the worst job in existence. But if he was too poor to have any servants, The host would wash feet, but it would be a public admission of his low estate. Okay, now we're at what's called the Last Supper. Jesus and his 12 guys are there. All of their feet are sticking out, and they are all dirty. Nobody had washed feet. I imagine John, who was the one who was over in seat number 1, right next to Jesus, and we know that because he said he was the disciple whom Jesus loved, who leaned against his breast. When I first read that, I thought, what kind of guys were these anyway? But he's telling you where he sat. It's like having a straight A report card, and you put it where everybody can see it, see? And to speak to Jesus, because they would lean on their left side as they ate with their right hand, to speak to Jesus, he had to lean against his chest. He's telling you where he sat. I was number 1. And we also know where Peter was there, because at one point when Jesus said, one of you will betray me, and they're all saying, is it I, is it I, is it I? And Peter signals across the table. You see, they sat according to rank. Maybe you didn't know that, but that's why there was a fight every meal. Who sits where? And Peter was in the last seat. How did he get there? He's probably thinking, this is no place for a pope. So I think Peter got there because of the argument, you know. I can hear him. Who had the great revelation that he was the Messiah? And they say, yeah, and then to whom did he say, get behind me, Satan, right after that? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, who walked on water? Yeah, and who sank? That's right. So here he is in the last seat, and he signals across the table to John to say, ask him who it is. So we know where they were seated. And you know who was seated in the guest of honor place? You see, there would be a guest of honor at a meal, if there was to be one, and he would be right next to the host, who would be right next to he would be the number 2 person at the table. That's where Jesus reclined. And the next person, they would begin a banquet or a meal by honoring the guest of honor. By taking the first, they didn't have sliced bread, they'd dip it in the sop. We think, oh boy, that sounds exciting. But they wouldn't get too excited over a hot dog either. So every generation has something that'll make you vomit. And they dip it in the soup or the stew, and the host would place it in the mouth of the guest of honor and would say something like, you do me honor, or would compliment him in some way. Who got the first bite? Judah, the guest of honor. They also believed back then, and this is significant for our communion service, they believed that when you eat with someone, you literally became part of that person. We say, oh, well, that was discontinued. No. In Acts chapter 10 or 11, 10, I think, Paul says we are members one of another because we are partakers of the same loaf. So when I take communion, I look around and decide, do I want to? I have been in churches that I didn't really want to, because they were an exclusivist kind of bunch, and it was breaking their rules to even let me be there. Yeah. And nobody's feet had been washed. If I were John, I would have said, why doesn't Peter wash feet? If I were Peter, I'd be thinking, I ain't washing feet. If I wash feet, they won't think I'm the greatest. So what happened? The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Creator of this universe, the Savior of our souls, got up from that table and did the lowest job in existence. He washed their feet. Jesus says, you call me Lord and Master, or greatest, and I am. I've washed your feet. Yeah, they knew that. You ought also to do the same. Now, some places they do have foot washing services, and it's a little edgy because it's not part of our greeting rituals. We don't understand it. And I've discovered as a pastor that if you decide just to have one, you don't dare announce it, because if you do, only about 4 people show up. And they have the cleanest feet they've had in centuries. New socks, powdered. I don't need it, but you can wash my feet. No. When we bring it up to date, foot washing was a welcoming, honoring, cleansing, loving thing to do. And I'm convinced that if we do anything today that is servant-hearted and honoring and soothing and cleansing and welcoming, we have truly washed someone's feet. I do a little game when I'm with somebody. And in our interaction, when I leave feeling better, happy that I was there, clean, really, I realize they just washed my feet and they didn't realize it, But pay attention to that. Sometimes it's real simple. You know what? I discovered that when I had stopped at a traffic light and one of my parishioners was on the other side of the traffic light and was honking, and I looked over there and we were waving like crazy. Then for a while after we went on, I don't know, I felt cleaner. I meet someone in a store. We're both shopping in the same place. And in just a few minutes of wonderful interaction, and we go on our way, I discover I feel cleaner. I mean, there are ways that we do that we can have that instant cleansing fellowship with each other. Well, so with that, Jesus defined love. Love is servanthood. I've had people ask me, and I think I might have said this last night, can you love someone and not like them? Well, like is an emotion that comes and goes. I'm so glad that John 3:16 does not say, for God so liked the world and changed his mind. No, he loved us. And when it says he loved the world, that kind of handles Calvinism, doesn't it? Kind of. So I love the world. Wow. No, love is an action that I do. If I'm going to do something to make life better for you, my feelings are really irrelevant. Now, sometimes our feelings go together, but not always. Sometimes they're at cross purposes. But love continues. Now, my wife and I have been married now for 57 years, Thank you. What do you mean, what a woman? It's my physique. But anybody that's been married more than 30 minutes has issues. And that's why I don't have a gun at my house. Because emotions come and go. And if I did have one, she would not know where it is. And there are times when you'd rather spit at each other than say, I love you. But love can go on nonetheless, where you do what is right and best for each other to make life better for each other. And those emotions come and go, but sometimes they come and stay for a while. And you love those moments. But it doesn't change you when it's a little bit testy. Now, what was it about the apostles that was lovable? Nothing. Except that the King of Kings and Lord of Lords who created them knew their value and did everything for them. That's one reason I think that they fought, was because Jesus was toward each one of them in such a way they each thought he was his favorite. Wow. So love one another as I have loved you. And by this shall all men know you are my disciples. You belong to me. When I was writing the Jesus style, I'm going to open that box back there and put them out on the table for you. If I keep talking about them, the price will go up to $50 each, so I better. But when I was writing the book and I came to this passage, a thought troubled me. I wondered if there was any church or denomination on the face of this planet whose only requirement for membership was that they love each other. I decided, and I wish I hadn't, to do the research. I could not find a single church or denomination who had only one requirement for membership, that you love each other. That was Jesus' requirement. He said, that's the way the world knows you belong to me. Wow. In fact, if you go to 1 John chapter 3, you will discover, when someone, maybe you ask someone, are you saved? They say, well, I don't know. I hope I am, and whatever. How can you know? They would say, look, the Bible makes it so plain. John says, this is how we know. We have passed from death to life because we love the brethren. Simple as that. And Jesus says, that's my new commandment. And I told you that it was the new commandment. I better prove that, hadn't I? All right? In Romans chapter 13, I'm going to have to read this to you because I don't want to even narrate this. I could, because I just love this passage so much. Romans chapter 13. No, Romans chapter 8, verse 13. I'll get there. They got to make a Bible that all you have to do is speak the location and it shows up. They probably do, don't they? Hmm? 13:8. Okay, I was right the first time. I knew I was. Yeah. Owe no one anything except to love one another. Now, what he's saying there is that's a constant debt. You know, get out of debt otherwise, but you will always have the debt of loving one another. For he who loves, hear this, for he who loves another has fulfilled the law. And he goes on and explains, for the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, are all, how much is all? Summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So you see, that thing Jesus commanded is the fulfillment of the law. It is the new commandment. And he says, love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. Now, when Paul spoke to the church at Galatia, that was a church that had backslid from, they received the Lord by grace, and then they backslid and went into the law again, you know. And Paul really got on them about that. He called them, I mean, you're like spiritual beggars out on the street corner with pencils in your box begging. And in chapter 5, he says in verse 14, for all the law, how much is all? Is fulfilled in one word, even in this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Verse 6, for in Christ Jesus neither circumcision nor uncircumcision avails anything or counts. In other words, when you say, I keep the law, I've been circumcised. Well, I'm a New Testament believer. I'm not circumcised, and I'm okay. He says, neither of those things matter. Isn't that interesting? A lot of what you hear happening religiously in politics and in public are people in one way or other demanding that you be circumcised. If you want to be part of us, or really you got to believe in this or not believe in that, or do this or that. But he says in Christ Jesus neither circumcision nor uncircumcision avails anything or matters, but faith working through love. There you go. That's what matters. And then, of course, in 1 John, he says, this is how we know we've passed from death to life, because we love the brother. In fact, there's There's a verse, we sing it. I'm going to sing for you. You guys didn't ask me to, but I get away with it sometimes. I always sing at the end so I can make a quick escape. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God, and knoweth God. And he that loveth not, slap, 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 knoweth not God, for God is love. Beloved, let us love one another. 1 John 4, 7 and 8. Thank you. See my agent. Is it any clearer? He wants us to love each other. And our love is how we serve each other. Now, one of the things I told you, and I've got to do it now because afternoon tonight, isn't it? You mean I've got all day?
You've got all day.
Man, I'm not used to this. Okay. It's all right. Treat me that way. I want to go in a direction that I hope will really enlarge your hearts and make you so happy to be a Christian you can't stand yourself. So I've got to say this now to you, and I made this promise to you. How do you live a sinless life? Oh, man, when someone tells us you need to do that, I know how you do. You start thinking about yourself. Oh, boy, I had this thought. I had that. I did it. Oh, man, no. Oh, I thought God's going to kill me. Now, what has happened is you've had your thoughts centered on yourself. And that's what God wants to free you from. It's how you treat others. See? And so, to live a sinless life is... Let me just real quickly talk about John chapter 21, when Peter had made the big mistake of lying to Jesus. I've left everything to follow you. And then he decides, I'm going back fishing. And he takes a bunch of guys with him, except for 2 unnamed guys. I don't know why they didn't name those. Maybe they said, if you name us, we'll sue you. And of course, the end of it. They're gathered around after Jesus gives them another great catch. Peter should say Peter and Jesus Incorporated. And they're gathered around that fire, and Jesus, they're all uncomfortable because, if you've ever been caught doing something you knew you weren't supposed to do, you're just kind of uncomfortable. And they were probably looking at Jesus and pointing at Peter and said, it's him. I didn't want to do it. He made me go. Well, and then Jesus looks at Peter, and Peter knew it was coming. You just know. Peter? Yes? Do you love me more than these? And I think he was asking 2 parts of that question. More than the fish, more than the other apostles. Because he had bragged about both of those. I think the other apostles moved away a bit, thinking, it's lightning time. And Peter said, Lord, you know I like you. That's the equivalent. Now, I was doing a message about Peter and his education, so to speak, at a church. It was a good-sized church. I said I started off and said, it just so happens there's one particular person in the Scripture with whom most of us actually identify. And that person is, and I did this, and with one voice they said, Peter! And now Jesus says to him something I wouldn't have said. I would have said, Peter, you're so wishy-washy, I never know where you're coming from, man. I mean, you're so off the radar sometimes, you'll never be Pope at this speed. But he didn't say that. He said, Peter, if you love me, feed my sheep. Oh. Well, everybody gathers again, and once more, Jesus said, Peter, and they wander away once again. Got to be lightning this time. Do you love me? Lord, I like you. Now, if I were Jesus, the second time I would have said, you know what, Peter? You need to go out in the desert and stare at your navel for about 6 months till you find yourself. But as one great man I heard said, what if you go out there in the desert and when you find yourself, there ain't nothing there? Do you love me? Lord, I like you. I would have used this second one to say, well, you need to really get your act together, boy. I can't depend on you. But he didn't. Once again, he says the equivalent of take care of my lambs. Third time, Peter, do you like me? I like it. Lord, you know everything. You know that I like you. Now, if I'd have been Jesus, I would have said, does it mean anything to you, Peter, that I have asked you 3 times if you love me? You remember anything you did recently 3 times? Does the word deny mean anything? You knew this was going to come up, didn't ya? He didn't do that. And sometimes we approach the Lord with the fear that he might be aware of what goes on in us. And for the third time, Jesus joins him and says, look, if you just like me, feed my sheep. In other words, give yourself away. Why didn't he deal with Peter? Guys, this is the most incredible thing. If you learn this, you got it made. God doesn't want you to get inward. Oh, I need to examine myself first. I need about 30 more years of seminary or cemetery, whichever it is. No. Even if you are a jerk like Peter, the process of giving yourself away and thinking of us and blessing others is the secret to 2 things. Number 1, it is the secret to a sinless life. When you're blessing other people, you ain't sinning. I thought you'd be up doing cartwheels. I just gave you the biggest secret of living a sinless life. Bless other people. Because when you do, you're not sinning. Really. Now, our forefathers wrote something, I think I've mentioned this, that they couldn't write today because our Supreme Court wouldn't let them. We believe that we have been endowed with our Creator with certain inalienable rights. The right to life, that's biblical. The right to liberty, that's biblical. This third one isn't, but it's provable in the Bible. And the pursuit of happiness. They knew that happiness was an Olympic runner, man. And you'd never catch it. But you can pursue it. We give you permission to pursue. And everybody's pursuing happiness. But the fact of the matter is, and this is another incredible secret, Jesus said, if you want to find your life, which is achieve that happiness, then lose it. Or in other words, give it to others. Bless other people. I have a friend who, I don't want to tell you the whole story, but he came into a good amount of money, and he wanted to use it. His life had been changed by the Jesus style, and he wanted to use it in ways that would be profitable. And so he decided to seek out those who don't get help and become their helper. And if you happen to read somewhere in the newspaper where some child has been discovered, where its parents kept it locked in a room all of its life, and it was filthy in there, and they didn't know how to relate to other people, didn't even have a language, and the state doesn't know what to do about them, he'll be there. There was even a book written about one girl that Florida discovered that way. And he decided they don't know what to do with her, but I have the means of making that child be surrounded with every possible opportunity of growth and personhood. And one of his friends said, why do you do that, man? With what you've got, you can do great things. He says, if I don't do this, will you do it? Well, no. Okay, then I will. And after he had helped one particular girl, who, by the way, has become a prayer partner of mine, and she is severely cerebral palsied. But boy, she prays and things happen. But he had just left a house that he had supplied to her with the things that would make her life wonderful. And on the way home, on a stop, he emailed me and he told me what had happened. And he said, I feel like $1 billion. And I thought, you're onto something. It wasn't what he had that made him happy. It was what he blessed that made him happy. Are you familiar with ChickfilA? Okay. I always want to eat there when Sunday rolls around. They close on Sunday. What's wrong with that guy? There's something wrong. But I heard him interviewed, the owner. He was a Christian. And the interviewer was not necessarily his friend. He was a skeptic. He said, look, you're a billionaire, right? Right. Isn't that a little bit out of keeping with being a Christian? And this guy says, yes, it is. Well, how do you handle that? He said, I'm giving it away as fast as I can, and nothing makes me happier than to be blessing other people like that. I wanted to shout in my car, man, as I'm listening to that. Here's a guy who discovered the secret. He's dead now, but he'd already given most of his money away. If he had had all that money alive, there would be lawyers everywhere who would get it. I did a funeral of 5 people at one time. Never forget it. I won't tell you how it happened that I did the funeral. I was not their pastor. But they had attended my church service on a Sunday night, last Sunday night of the year, before going back home the next day to San Antonio. And the father was an old Army pilot, and he made, you only need one good mistake as a pilot. And he made that one, and they crashed on the way home. It took them the rest of the week to find the plane in a heavily wooded area, and they were all dead. And as it happened, I was not their pastor, but his parents, who had no pastor, and I had visited them because I had heard that they didn't have a pastor. So I just went over to comfort them, and they asked me, would you do the wedding? Would you do the funeral? I said, I'd be glad to. Well, it so happened that the father-in-law of this man was a wealthy, hate-filled man. He hated this son-in-law because he had led this daughter to the Lord, and it's like he was praying for the day when he'd come crawling on his knees back. But you see, this guy, this family, who didn't have a lot, but what they had, at Christmas, every one of them, 5 of them were all soul winners, and Christmas time, their missions program. Are you leading the missions discussion, or who was it? Who was leading? Who was going to be talking about you? Well, okay, well, I've got a new idea for you. I found out, I didn't know this. This was a strange family to me, but all of the things that started filling, 3 people got saved at the visitation beforehand. People who came up and said, this was the most trustworthy man I've ever met in my life. It is a shame that he is dead. Somebody needs to replace him. Tell me how. And I led 3 people to the Lord at the visitation. Well, I hope at least that many people get saved when I go, You mean he's gone? Oh, boy, good. Can I get saved now? But at the funeral, because they would, at Christmas time, they would have a jar in the middle of the table, and each one would have a picture of what they wanted to get the other one for Christmas. He said, this is what I wanted to give to you, and this was how much it was going to cost, and they would put that money in a jar. And so you got the good intentions. Yeah, I wanted to get you this Cadillac, but I could only get a toy one, but here's the money for that one. And they'd put it in the jar, and then they would take that money and cross the border and bless Mexican churches and people with it. I'm thinking, what a group. And I'm talking at the funeral with the father-in-law. Never spoke to me. He brought his lawyer. They all flew in their private plane. And only his lawyer spoke to me. But I was still at that point, braggadocious enough to know that I was in charge of this funeral and it would go like I wanted it to go. They knew that too. The lawyer knew it. He said, they want you to do this. I said, I'll consider it. Thank you. Okay, thank you. And he'd go back. But in the middle of my message, as I'm talking about how here were people who understood that they couldn't take this to heaven with them, but they could sure send it ahead. He and his daughter, who hung on to him out there, yelled at me at that point and said, "Would you please shut up?" And I kept on. It didn't faze me at all. I thought, good, I'm getting to you. But they were the happiest family. Man, my church people just gathered around them to listen to them because they just exuded Jesus. It was just wonderful. And the guy who had it all and wanted more, "I'll talk to you through my lawyer." He hated him. But you see, I'd much rather be like the guy who is deliriously happy giving it away than the one who wants to see how I can get yours in addition to mine. That's miserable. Well, so I've given you the secret to happiness and the secret to living a sinless life. What else you want? I got to make one more comment. This is just off the record kind of thing. Brown, right? My wife was a Brown. Her dad was named Charlie Brown. And he looked so much like you. We're related, man. But I just love that dude to pieces. I had the perfect in-laws. He would, when they first met me, and I went up to ask for her hand, I played football in the first year of college. And I played football before they had face masks. Now, that explains some things. And when I went up to meet them, I had been shaved bald. It was a hazing thing that they did, and my face looked like I had been in a fight as I was trying to escape a jail. I really looked bad. And later I asked him, "Dad, you remember when you first met me?" "Uh-huh." "What did you really think?" "Oh, we love you, Gayle." "I know that, but what did you really think when you first met me?" And all he would ever say is, "We love you, Gayle." I figured the sale of aspirin went up pretty high after I had been there. What is going to happen to our only daughter? Oh, man. Look at what's taken him away. Well, now I hope you understand the simplicity of what it means to live an exciting and a joyous life and a fulfilling life and a sinless life and be the happiest person that you've ever met in your life. And it's so simple. Love one another as I have loved you. That means serve each other. Make life better for you. And don't let the devil trick you into thinking, "Well, wait a minute, what's in this for me?" See, that's cancer. Did you know that it is every cell in your body was designed to bless the rest of the body, but it's possible for one part of your body to begin to serve only itself. It happens. Doctors have a name for it. They call it cancer. That's the definition of cancer. When one part of your body begins to serve only itself and only asks, "What's in this for me?" And health is when you say, "How can I bless other people? How can I help the rest of the body be whole?" So, man, what questions are left? Well, hopefully tonight I can at least send myself off. They're taking me away. They're coming to get me away. I want you to have this view of God that's so exciting you can hardly stand it. Okay, I'm finished. Are you going to talk about it?